The spring 2023 anime season has only just begun, but I've already found myself gravitating heavily towards one show in particular, Heavenly Delusion or Tengoku Daimakyo, directed by Mori Hirotaka and created at Studio Production IG. While it has only aired one episode at the time of the script, I was already impressed with the sense of world building, characterization, and tone that it managed to strike in only 24 minutes of runtime. So what exactly is in this first episode that has left me so eagerly anticipating Saturdays even more than I already was? Let's take a quick look. The series immediately begins with a location that suggests a fruitful, happy world. The bright red imagery of the tomatoes, along with a child presenting one of them to another that's presumably sick and lying in a bed, hints at a sense of community or camaraderie resting on mutual kindness and health. The matching clothes on all the children implies a sense of uniformity in the place, or, to put it another way, that they're actual uniforms. As we get further acquainted with this location, complete with camera sweeps across its green grasses and laughing characters, we zero in on one of the children, Mimihime, commenting to her friend that they have a test later. This little bit of dialogue clues us in that this place, regardless of precisely what it is one in which its children have either special gifts or abilities. When it turns out that Mimihime's precognition appears true, one of the children, Tokyo, is sent a mysterious message during the test asking if he wants to go outside of the outside. This signifies that there is an outside world that the children were previously unaware of directly, and that one of the main storytelling points will be the moment when the outside world makes its presence known to them. But it doesn't take very long to see what that outside world is like, because the very next shot is of Maru and Kiruko wandering outside, and the landscape itself is markedly more desolate and worn, evidently in the aftermath of some kind of post-apocalyptic or dystopic event, called the Collapse in Universe. Heavenly Delusion thus starts with a rather stark juxtaposition: the calm serenity of the interior school or nursery with happy children versus an exterior world that, while still calm in the sense that there are no overt monsters running around, is far more decrepit and colder. Hirotaka, who also storyboarded this episode, evidently took great strides to make sure that the art director, Kaneko Yuji, took great pains to demonstrate the sheer amount of contrast between the two locations. Compared to the pristineness of the nursery, even from the first zooming out, we see a vast array of overgrow on the landscape, and the destroyed roads feel unwelcoming and rocky. The brittleness of the surroundings is also encapsulated in the numerous objects that stand within it. A traffic light that no longer functions and has a building behind it more or less uninhabitable, a destroyed car, and houses with overturned or abandoned furniture, themselves falling victim to the overgrow. The stairs creak when the characters walk on them. The color design, headed by Hirose Izumi, is also more muted, as the greens are given blacker and browner hues from both color and lighting, and the white of the nursery's artificial lights are replaced instead with a sun that, while still clearly in daylight, feels hollower as well. With only a few seconds, we see a world that has essentially died, and our two characters, Maru and Kiruko, trying to make the most of their circumstances. And speaking of the two of them, we already learn virtually everything we need to know about them purely from their first few interactions, both with each other and with this worn world that they try to survive in. As they meander through, they try to look for specific houses, which demonstrates that they're seasoned, or at the very least, decently experienced at adapting to their situation, while simultaneously being both surprised by and surprisingly lackadaisical about just going into supposedly abandoned homes by breaking their windows. They find themselves excited over simple pleasures like a toilet, regardless of whether it works or not, or unused toilet paper. Their dialogue is tinged with the kind of tongue-in-cheek awareness of the fact that the world has gone to hell in a handbasket, but that it won't stop them from occasionally poking fun at one another and their own respective personalities and mannerisms. It even goes so far as to show how both of them perceive the relationship that they have, and that despite how well they get along as a duo, there's a fundamental disconnect in how they view each other. But this is still only one part of who they are, and they leave no question about the fact that they're both crafty and slick when it comes to defending themselves from something more overtly antagonistic. With the well-choreographed animation by Arai Kazuto, Araki Ryo, and Takeuchi Tetsuya, they managed to beat up and ward off some goons, complete with their own high-powered gun that gives off gravitational beam emitter vibes a la Blame. As if that weren't enough, they manage to get some insight from those same goons that they meet later, using guile and fake-outs to wriggle their way out of the situation. Though the action sequence itself is quite brief, this helps establish a fundamental aspect of Heavenly Delusion's tone. It makes no pretense about the fact that the world is barren materialistically and with tonal oppressiveness from who, or later on what, may be waiting in the wings. But Maru and Kiruko can provide some comedic levity and wit to help balance out any potential pessimism that risks coloring the narrative too heavily. And one of the other ways that this is achieved is that the episode spends time alternating between the outside world and the nursery, allowing the previously mentioned juxtaposition to cement itself further and to allow timeouts for each story so one doesn't overshadow the other. It also allows for contrast in regards to how the series builds its two respective environments. The children in the nursery are not able to move about as freely as Maru and Kiruko, so the amount of discovery and exploration that they are capable of is greatly reduced due to their present circumstances. But that mysterious message that Tokio received on his test still lingers in his mind, and we also see more of the gifts that the children have, like a penchant for art or intense reflexes. It culminates in one moment when Tokio is outside at night and the nursery's director confirms his suspicions that there is indeed an outside world beyond the walls that exists, but that it's a miserable place. And all this comes right on the heels of a giant black-winged monster appearing before the window of the house Maru and Kiruko are staying in. Part of the reason why this first episode works so well is that it's world building and characterization by association, and just letting the imagery and natural feeling dialogue do the conveyance rather than an omniscient narrator telling us everything, even when the show does have a bit of an info dump with the older woman that we encounter later. With the way the camera moves throughout the space and the characters interacting, both within the nursery and outside it, Heavenly Delusion conveys an incredible amount of the necessary information for the audience to know that this is how the universe functions. The most immediate comparison I've seen people make with this premise is that it's akin to The Promised Neverland, another series which dealt with the idea of test-taking and gifted children in a particularly sequestered setting. There are, however, many key differences between the two that make Heavenly Delusion its own separate entity, especially in regards to their stylistic ambiance, narrative presentation, and overall tone. For one, we are aware of the outside world, both in its existence and how it is, right from the get-go in Heavenly Delusion, whereas the outside world's grimdark was the first episode's major dramatic reveal for The Promised Neverland. As a result, the underlying horror of that series had more time to cook, especially since even within the happy moments at the orphanage, there was always the sense that something was amiss with how Isabella was framed in the course of the show. That series was also more freely incorporating brooding dark colors to aid its disquieting ambiance, unlike here, which alternates between artificial and natural light depending on the differences in environment. As such, Heavenly Delusion feels less like conventional horror, as in, this is actively trying to scare you, and more going for a sense that the world, as it stands now, just royally sucks, which is itself a rather horrifying thing to consider. One approach is a little more subdued than the other. The kids at the nursery are also rather light-hearted in their conversations. And when the drama proper arrives, Tokio's conversation is not really a dramatic reveal for us as viewers, but when paired alongside the arrival of that monster at the end, at least hints to the audience, expect this kind of stuff. Its intent is less for shock and more for gradual laying of foundation. It's less about the ever-lying-in-wait specter of death like the monsters in The Promised Neverland were, even though monsters do exist in Heavenly Delusion's outside world. They're just simply going for two different kinds of ambiance and affect. But I'm getting sidetracked here. The point being, Heavenly Delusion's first episode was a welcome addition to the spring 2023 season, and I greatly look forward to more. Hell, the next episode even airs today, so that's an added bonus. Thank you for watching. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, join Discord, follow socials, or donate to my Patreon, and click the bell for notifications. In the meantime, this has been Zenote of Zenote Taku. Happy viewing, everyone!